Hey everyone, it's Amy with Sunday Girl Eats. This is the first time I'm appearing in one of my videos, so now you have a face to put with my name. So today we're going to use butternut squash. One of my favorite butternut squash dishes are butternut squash raviolis with browned butter and sage. I'm not going to make raviolis. I actually wanted to do a pizza recipe. I had done one last year, I think for the August or September issue. I forget which one it was. And I thought that I would, do a pizza recipe every year as well. So today I'm going to do a pizza with the butternut squash, the sage, some brown butter. We're also going to use some prosciutto in there, a few different cheeses, and I'm going to use my cast iron skillet again. It's great to use for pizzas. You don't have to use a cast iron skillet. You can, use your favorite pizza stone or pan, especially if you want a thinner crust. But I'm going to go ahead and use that today so I have that nice thick crust. So I'm going to get everything ready and we'll get started. Okay, so for the recipe, I've preheated my oven to 450 degrees. I need that temperature for the cast iron skillet, so you might have to modify your recipe depending on what type of pan you use. I have my pizza dough, which I've sat out so it comes to room temperature or close to it. I'm actually using pizza dough that my local grocery store makes, which is a great option. You can also make your own, or there are different other pre-made options of pizza dough as well. I have not made my own pizza dough yet. That's something that's still on my to-do list, and this is just quicker and a little bit easier too. I also have some fresh sage that we're going to use. We're going to saute the butternut squash in some of this. I have about 2 tablespoons of butter that we're going to brown first. I have my shredded mozzarella cheese. We're also going to use some fresh mozzarella as well as some ricotta. And then I also have some prosciutto and our butternut squash. I've taken the butternut squash and have just peeled the skin off of it, and then we're gonna slice it into really thin slices. You're probably not gonna use all of the butternut squash, so you can always cube it and roast it and use it for something else. I do have a butternut squash bisque that's on my blog. If you go to sundaygirleats.wordpress.com, you can find that recipe. It's really easy to make, really flavorful, and it freezes really well. So if you want to make something like that with the leftover squash, or as I mentioned, you could roast it and just use it as a side dish. So we're going to go ahead and slice this as thin as we can. They don't have to be exactly uniform. I'll probably cut them in half as well once I'm done slicing some of them. And because I'm doing a round pie in the cast iron skillet, we don't need a ton of squash. I don't have a lot of surface area to cover. If you were using more of a longer pizza pan or a pizza stone and you were doing a thin crust, you would probably need some more squash. So you can just modify this based on the shape that you're making and the thickness of the pizza. I also had thought about doing a potato pizza, which is also really delicious. I don't know if you've ever made that. So you would do something similar with cutting the potato into these thin slices. And peeling the skin off, or the rind off the butternut squash, definitely makes it a lot easier to cut. So if you were going to be cutting this into cubes, I suggest doing that first. It just makes it easier to handle. So I think we have enough slices here. I'm just gonna go ahead and cut them into some smaller pieces and try to use the ones that are pretty thin. A couple of these are a little too thick. All right, so we'll use those for something else. Then I'm gonna go ahead and, since I'm using the cast iron skillet, I'm gonna cook everything in that same pan. So I'm gonna brown the butter and add the squash and the sage, and that way the dough from the pizza also has some of that flavoring. I'm also, I want it to be pretty flavorful. We're not going to use any type of sauce, just our olive oil as well that we'll brush the dough with, and we'll make sure that the pan is also coated. If you're using the cast iron skillet, you want to make sure that it's well seasoned, and that you also, before you put the pizza dough in there, you're going to want to add some olive oil and brush it along the sides. I made pizza in mine for the first time a few weeks ago and wish that I had put a little bit more olive oil in it. Some of the cheese stuck to it, but luckily I was able to get the pizza out and then was able to clean all the cheese off afterwards. I got a little nervous that I ruined my pan the first time using it for pizza. Okay, so I've heated up my pan over medium-high heat, and I've added two tablespoons of butter. And as you can see, the butter is browning already. Normally when you do brown butter, it takes a little bit longer, but because we're using this cast iron skillet, it basically browns right away. So to the brown butter, I'm gonna add some fresh sage. I'm gonna just chop up these leaves here. And I'm gonna just turn the heat down a little, and then we're gonna go ahead and add our butternut squash. So I've added our butternut squash to the pan with the sage and the browned butter, and I'm gonna just saute this on each side until it's lightly browned. I have this over medium heat. And if you're not using a cast iron skillet, it would have taken you a little bit longer to brown the butter. You'll know when it's browned. It gets this really great smell to it. I don't even know how to describe it, but you just know. So we really only need a couple minutes on each side. This one's really thin, so that looks done. I'm gonna just transfer these to a plate. I'm gonna add this last little bit of sage. And these are gonna crisp up more in the oven too, so I don't want them too done. So I have our cast iron skillet ready for the pizza dough. I did wipe out some of the brown butter, and I've added a little bit of olive oil. I'm gonna transfer the pizza dough directly to the pan. Just make sure if you use the cast iron skillet to saute everything that you just watch, because it is really, really hot. So I'm gonna just kind of knead the dough in here. And then once I've done that, I'm gonna flip it over to get the other side. So now that that's done, I'm gonna add a little bit more sage and a little Italian seasoning that I have, just to give the dough a little extra flavor. Okay, that should be good. We're then gonna sprinkle some of our shredded mozzarella cheese over the dough. I learned from another recipe that I had used. This actually helps keep the crust stay crispy before you add your other ingredients. So you wanna sprinkle the cheese over the crust. And you can use more or less cheese depending on how much cheese you wanna use, or how cheesy you want this to be. All right, I'm then gonna layer some of our squash. And then I'm gonna add the prosciutto and the ricotta cheese. I'm gonna just add this in little dollops. You could even probably spread like a thin layer of this underneath everything if you wanted to as well. But like I said, I wanted to keep the dough nice and crisp. Okay. Next, I'm gonna go ahead and layer the prosciutto. And then the fresh mozzarella, I'm gonna just pull this off into pieces. I'm just gonna pinch pieces off and then just drop this right on here. And then if you want, you can use more of the shredded mozzarella. I'm gonna just use this. And then we're gonna transfer this to the oven. It's gonna cook for about 18 to 20 minutes. You wanna put it on a lower shelf in the oven. And that way the bottom gets nice and crispy, and then you can transfer it to the middle shelf or the top shelf towards the end of baking if your toppings need to be a little bit more crispy. You could also do this on a grill if you wanted to. You know, as I mentioned, September, we still have great weather. Or if you're lucky enough, if you have a pizza oven, that would be a dream outdoor kitchen. If I had one, would definitely include a pizza oven. All right, so I'm gonna transfer this to the oven and we're gonna check on it in about 18 to 20 minutes. So my pizza is finished cooking. As I mentioned before, you need about 18 to 20 minutes if you're using the cast iron skillet at 450 degrees. I cooked my pizza on the bottom rack for the first 18 minutes. That way it gets nice and crispy. And then I transferred it to the middle rack for the last 2 to 3 minutes. You can leave it in there a little bit longer on the middle or top rack, depending on how well done you want the cheese. Mine is lightly browned. I don't really like the cheese in my pizza to get too brown, but I know some people do like it well done. You could serve this with a nice fall salad. I think that would be a good addition to the pizza. If you decide to make this recipe, you can tag me on Instagram at Sunday Girl Eats and use the hashtag Sunday Girl Eats. And I look forward to seeing you all again for my winter recipe. Thanks.